All right, a lot of veterans never even file a VA disability claim for one simple reason. They think they just don't have the right proof or enough proof. Maybe it's because you never went to sick call. Maybe your medical records ended up being missing or you just don't know how to get them. Or maybe the injury or the accident didn't show up until years after you got out. And because of that, thousands of veterans assume that the VA will just deny their claim, so they never even try. And that bugs me. But here's the truth. The VA approves claims every single day without traditional medical evidence that veterans would have gotten from service. Sure, having service treatment records documenting something that happened to you in service does make it easier, but it is possible. In this video, I'm going to try to show you 5 powerful types of evidence that veterans can and do use every day to win VA claims, even when their records are incomplete or missing. If you're a veteran trying to figure out the VA process, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, because I like to use my experiences to break down the claims process in simple terms so that you can build the strongest claims possible. So let's get into it. Let's look at 5 ways that vets can still win claims even if they don't have something in their service treatment records. All right, so first of all, the truth about any VA disability claim is that the VA is essentially going to use 3 different things to approve or for a vet to win their claim. Number 1, you've got to have a current diagnosis, okay? So that's really going to be the easy part, because if you're dealing with something now, that means you probably already have the current diagnosis. But then the hard part for those of us that don't have medical records from while we were in the military, or something to document something that happened, is that you've got to have something that you can anchor to the military. So it's got to be what we call an in-service event, okay? That can be an injury that happened while we were in the military. It could be an illness. It could be an exposure. It could be really anything. I mean, and really, if you're going to put in a claim, you've got to start off with your own theory first. So you've got to have some sort of anchor point to service, something that you can point to and say, this is what caused it. And then, of course, you've got to be able to have the connection between the two. And we'll talk kind of about how all that comes in. But these are 3 important things that if you don't have it, or if you can't at least theorize it without evidence, you won't be able to get it approved. So if you can see that anchor thing, if you can say, hey, like this happened to me while I was in service, and this is why I'm dealing with this now. Once you have that, once you've kind of stepped over that hurdle, now you can start thinking about the evidence that you can use to prove it, although you may not have it. So the big important thing in this video is that evidence can come from more than just service medical records. Okay, we can develop evidence after we get out of the military, and that's okay. And vets do it all the time. You just got to have evidence to prove it. All right, so the first one is going to be a personal statement. Now, remember, not any one of these 5 things by itself is going to prove service connection, but all of them together, or at least some of them together, can really help you establish service connection. But a personal statement, in my opinion, is very important when you're trying to show the rater or the VA that you have a condition that manifested in service, or maybe a condition that something happened to you while you were in service. This is where it started. That personal statement can kind of lay the groundwork, and you can explain and paint a picture for the VA rater. You can talk about what happened to you in service. You can talk about an incident that occurred. You can talk about an accident. You can talk about an exposure, whatever it is. If you're watching this video, you probably already have a condition you're dealing with, and you already theorize something that, like the reason why you're having nightmares in the middle of the night is because of something you experience when, from some sort of traumatic event. Or, if your knees are hurting, in your mind, it was caused, by your military service, by jumping out of airplanes, or, being exposed to, arduous PT sessions, whatever it is. Now, you're no doctor, so you can't prove that, but you can at least talk about, why you think this may have started in service through a personal statement. You can talk about how bad the symptoms are. You can talk about what the symptoms are. You can talk about when you remember the symptoms first starting. especially if the symptoms started while you were in the military. That's a great way to articulate to the person reading that personal statement that you are claiming that it started while you were in service. And then, of course, how the condition affects your life today. And that'll be important for trying to figure out, what your rating percentage should be. But, all the information you put into that personal statement will be able to help the VA start connecting the dots and seeing the service connection. And that's really what you need to prove service connection. So the second thing is a buddy statement. Now, a buddy statement is, essentially the same thing as a personal statement, but a buddy statement is written by someone, someone that you served with for purposes of service connection. It could be someone that witnessed, that incident or that injury that you didn't get documented while you were in the military. So they can explain in their own words the injury or the event that, you're claiming caused whatever condition you're dealing with. If you had symptoms during service, they may be able to articulate that. And listen, I'll give you a good example. We all probably had pain of some level while we were in service, but most of us may not have even went to the doctor for it. But I guarantee at times we complained about it with our partners, right? Our buddies, and while we were in the military, we complained about, lower back pain or our shoulder hurting. It might have even been so much that they may recall it now. And if they remember those times that you complained about that helps to show connection. If you were married, to your significant other while you were in the military and you came home and you complained about symptoms, your spouse might remember that, and that would be a great person to write, a test to that, to show that, hey, this did, or the veteran did complain about this. Other things could be changes after coming home from a deployment. You may have never, maybe it's a mental health condition, but you never went to. You never went to see a professional about it, but maybe your significant other does remember, some changes in your just how you act when you came home, and other symptoms too. All of these can be documented. And I threw some examples on here that I kind of talked about, but fellow service members are great people to write buddy letters. Friends, current friends from back then, current friends now, family members. And then I throw employer on there. Just because your employer can give you a good statement about, like, maybe reasons why you had to call out of work because of how the condition is affecting you. This doesn't necessarily help with proving service connection, but it does help with getting the right rating and showing how it does impact your life. The next one is going to be private medical records. So most of us probably see the doctor now. We've been out of, the military for 10, 15, 20 years, and, we've, have more time, and we figure we probably need to see the doctor. So the things that are bothering us, we're out there with the doctors, right? And if you are, you want to make sure that those medical records are included in your package to show that, something's happened. So a good example of this might be, maybe 5 or 6 years after you got out of the military, maybe your knees really started to bother you, so you started going to the doctor. You want to be able to show that at some point, even though it was after, you started going to the doctor and, you started explaining how it was bothering you. That kind of shows that there is that there's records out there showing that at some point you did go and start being seen for the condition, albeit 5 years after being out of the military is not enough to prove service connection, but at least it shows that you started to go. And then you can use things like personal statements and some of the other medical evidence that I'll talk about here in a minute to kind of connect the gaps in your overall theory. But these private medical records are a good way to show kind of diagnoses and treatment history as well. These can help prove that current disability and connect it to, to your actual service. And the number 4 is going to be a nexus statement or a nexus letter. And I want to quickly throw a disclaimer out there. I don't think that any veteran should just, or at least I think you should think about before you start, finding a doctor and paying $1,000 or less or more for a nexus letter. I think what is really most important about a nexus is simply a nexus statement. And if you're already going to your personal doctor, you could talk to your doctor about, what they think, what their opinion is. I mean, especially if they're already treating you. You could talk to your current doctor or your nurse practitioner or your PA, about your condition, and you could ask them. You could say, "Listen, doc, I've got this theory in my mind that I did these types of activities while I was in the military, or I injured myself while I was in the military, and here's how I did it. Is it possible, or how possible is it that this injury that I did while I was in the military could have contributed to what I'm dealing with today?" And tell them you're trying to get your records with the VA straight. You're trying to get your, all your disability stuff squared away. And, their opinion would be helpful because it would help either prove or disprove that it has something to do with the incident that you had while you're in the military, or an exposure, or whatever it is that you're trying to anchor to service. Your medical professional is a great person to be able to tell you, what they think, and some of them might be hesitant, and it's okay if they are. You may not be able to get that medical opinion from them, but you can explain to them that the VA, when you're doing these claims, they require a medical opinion, and, the best person to give that medical opinion would most certainly, in my opinion, be the person that is giving you, your treatment. Now, they may feel uncomfortable doing it. They probably don't know anything about the VA. So, you may get a no, but it's worth a shot. If you get a yes, explain to them that if they're going to write a statement for you, that the VA does kind of want it. Actually, they want it to be based off of, some sort of articulation of facts. They want it to be based off of science, and they want it quantified, right? Like they want to see the words "at least as likely as not," or "more likely than not," or "less likely than not." Now, the VA standard of proof is "at least as likely as not related to service." And it shouldn't just say related to service. It should say related to this incident that occurred on this date, or the constant PT sessions, or the constant jumping out of airplanes. That's what they want to see. They want to see a statement, and they can even write a letter for you. But that is just one potential option for you. Just as you're coming up with ideas on how to prove something, your medical professional that you see regularly is a great resource, in my opinion. Another option is to go out and pay for a nexus letter. There are so many medical professionals out there that advertise that they are, that they do these, that they write these. And if, they're going to charge you, I would almost, talk to your VSO, talk to an accredited agent, see what they think about the current evidence that you already have before you pay $1,000 for a nexus letter. Obviously, this is just, a consideration. You got to do what makes you feel most comfortable. I would almost say, like, see what you can get through your VSO, and then, potentially, if you have to go up on appeal, then, maybe chat with your VSO about going out and paying for a nexus letter, essentially an independent medical opinion from, someone that deals with, VA disability claims all the time. All right. The next one is just other evidence. So there's other records out there that can help prove your case. Deployment records show that you were in a certain location at a certain time. Those can be great. Like you could, if you're trying to just prove something that, had something to do with being in a deployment, or maybe you're saying you were hurt while you're on a deployment, you have a personal statement, you have a buddy statement from a few buddies. You also have deployment records from yourself. You have deployment records from your buddies showing that all of you guys are there. Maybe you have a photograph. Maybe you fell off of a deuce and a half. Maybe you have a picture of that deuce and a half. Whatever it is. Personnel records are also a great way to show that maybe you attended certain courses, things that just kind of prove whatever you're trying to prove. Awards or duty assignments, awards can potentially be a way to show that you were in a certain spot at a certain time to just corroborate, a statement. Duty assignments can be good as well, especially if you're trying to say that, like, I don't know, maybe this duty assignment, you're constantly exposed to loud noises, and you're proving that you're in that duty assignment, and maybe your personal statement also draws on the fact that duty assignment, you're constantly exposed to heavy gunfire, and you're trying to go for like a hearing loss or something, right? And then line of duty reports, just showing that, an incident happened, whatever the case is. Explaining in your personal statement why you didn't go to the doctor, why you didn't seek treatment is always helpful as well. You're looking for anything that can help prove to the VA rater a theory that you're coming up with to anchor whatever it is, whatever condition you have, to some sort of in-service event while you were in the military. So the big takeaway is you don't have to have in-service treatment records or had gone to sick call. You don't have to have those to get a claim going. You want. I hate when I talk to veterans who are like, "Yeah, I never went to the doctor, so I don't deserve a rating." Yes, you do. Like if you had something happen to you while you're in service and it makes sense, you should definitely try. Go talk to a VSO. See what you can do. Try to work on gathering evidence to build a stronger claim. If you want to know more information about this from my point of view, check out my website. It's free, informedveteran.com. I'll also put a link to a Facebook page I started in the bio. Good luck.